We have been reflecting on the Divine Mercy devotion, and part of the devotion involves showing mercy toward our neighbor, putting mercy into action. And so in the next two talks, I would like to reflect with you upon a passage from the Gospel of Mark, taken from the second chapter, verses 1 through 12. It's the story of the healing of the paralytic, and I will read that Gospel for you now. When he had come back to Capharnaum several days afterward, it was heard that he was at home. And many were gathered together so that there was no longer room, not even near the door. And he was speaking the word to them. And they came, bringing him a paralytic carried by 4 men. Being unable to get to him because of the crowd, they removed the roof above him. And when they had dug an opening, they let down the pallet on which the paralytic was lying. And Jesus, seeing their faith, said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." But some of the scribes were sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, "Why does this man speak this way? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Immediately Jesus, aware in his spirit that they were reasoning that way within themselves, said to them, "Why are you reasoning about these things in your heart? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up and pick up your pallet and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." He said to the paralytic, "I say to you, get up, pick up your pallet, and go home." And he got up and immediately picked up the pallet and went out of sight of everyone, so that they were all amazed and were glorifying God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." In the Byzantine liturgy, the Sunday on which this gospel passage is read is called the Sunday of the Bed-toters. I want to reflect with you on the bed-toters, the church that reconciles. While it's fun to say such things as bed-toters, at least if you're a geek like me, that designation draws attention to those other important figures in the gospel. While we are often tempted to focus on what Jesus has done for the paralyzed man, helped him pick up his mat and walk, and forgiven his sins, the title, Sunday of the Bed-toters, highlights the others in the story, his friends who carried him. Because the fact of the matter is that no matter how great Jesus' almighty power, that paralyzed man would never have been cured if the 4 friends had not cared enough to load him onto that blanket, and each of them grabbing a corner, struggling to carry him through the streets to the house where Jesus was. This image is to be a reminder of the demands of my mercy, because even the strongest faith is of no avail without works, Jesus said to Sister Faustina. In a general way, this image of friends who carry one another, who carry out a work of mercy, is a type or an image of the church. We are not merely a church of the reconciled that has received forgiveness. Rather, we are also a church that reconciles. These friends who carry the paralytic along the way represent the church who time and time again draw those in need of healing, whether physical or spiritual, to Jesus. Let us examine the passage from the bed-toters' perspective. One wonders why these friends are taking the paralytic to Jesus. Has Jesus' reputation already begun to spread so far that he provides for them a source of hope? Has the paralytic taken a sudden turn for the worse, or is his problem chronic? Undoubtedly, these friends love the paralytic. Perhaps this is their motivation. It would be very difficult to walk through such busy streets and to cover such a long distance. But to do so carrying a person requires still greater effort. Just imagine that at that particular moment, the weight, how hard it would be to keep hold of that blanket. I wonder how many times they had to stop, for example, to catch their breath. What friends! They brought the paralytic to Jesus. What must have been going through their minds when finally they arrived at the house where Jesus was? They might have thought, boy, he's heavier than I thought. Thank God we made it. Imagine their dismay at seeing such a large crowd of people stacked up around the door of the house that they couldn't even get close. And perhaps they began to thinking, all of our work has been in vain, all of it's wasted. And then what happened at that critical moment? We know they did not say, "Well, sorry, Charlie, too bad, we tried." But I wonder which one of them got the idea of actually dragging the poor guy up onto the roof, tearing away the tiles or the straw, and letting him down into the crowd below. Who had the courage to say, "Hey, it's not over yet. We can lower him down through the roof"? The others must have stared at him, thinking, it's not worth the effort. Perhaps no one wanted to be the first to admit defeat. On the other hand, they might have cared so much for their friend that nothing was going to stop them. By hook or by crook, they were going to get their friend, the paralytic, in to see Jesus. Next came the back-breaking task of getting up on the roof, then clearing away the patch from the roof, and finally, the strength, the coordination, the delicate care that had to be taken to lower him down by the ropes or blankets. Carefully, slowly, finally, there is Jesus. This is the effort that the Catholic and the priest, in particular, must make to draw others to Jesus, to receive his healing presence in their lives. I have a priest friend, he's a Welshman named John. John was born with a stump for one leg and used as an artificial limb. John was 26 years old when he came to live in our college in Rome. He came to live with us in part because he needed to have an automobile to get himself to and from classes, and we were happy to accommodate him, his disability, and for his purposes, his automobile. Another friend of mine was a Canadian fellow, Peter. He also was a priest, but he didn't live in our college. And the three of us, along with 6 other Americans, we all studied at the Alphonsine Academy in Rome. We were all studying moral theology. John was young, and like many Welshmen his age, he loved to have a drink. And the pain from his leg also led him to drink. He was fun to be around, but he was never very serious about anything. The priests of our college, we all liked John, but no one really felt it was their business to say anything to him about the excesses of his drinking. We seldom, if ever, saw him at our community masses, even on Sundays. We rarely, if ever, saw him before noon. Occasionally, we'd see him at our evening classes, but mostly we didn't see John. When we did see him, it was usually when he was on his way out the door for a late-night drink. Not to be judgmental, but it was hardly the model life of a priest. One night, John asked me if I wanted to go out with him, and I begged off, thinking of myself, I just can't keep pace with him. I don't want to be in the car with him. I don't want to have to get him home. I don't want to be out late. So John decided to call Peter up, and they went out for dinner, and then they went to a pub, and then they went to another pub, and finally they went to a late-night pub. Then John drove Peter back to the Canadian college. On his way home, there was a pedestrian in the middle of the road, not on the zebra stripes, and John hit him. The man was also a British national, and he lay unconscious on the ground. Some Italian bystanders saw the whole incident, and instead of helping the man or helping John, who hit his head on the dashboard, the drunken Italians pulled John out of the car and began to beat him and kick him. John managed to get back in the car and drove back to our college. John then hobbled back to the scene of the incident to see what became of the man whom he had hit. The police were still there taking a report, and John told them that he had been the driver. The man was in a coma, and to this day has not emerged from that coma. John brought the police back to the college. He had never bothered to learn Italian, so he couldn't give the police any testimony. So I was awakened to serve as his translator. The college's lawyers had to be notified and contacted. Each day we monitored the progress of the comatose man, hoping and praying that he wouldn't die. The British Embassy was contacted about the incident. John's Archbishop flew to Rome to monitor the situation. Finally, John appeared in the chapel, I think to ask for God's mercy. On Monday, I saw Peter at class and told him what had happened, and Peter was shocked. He said, I guess I wasn't a very good friend. At the time, I thought, you're darn right you weren't a good friend. You were a collaborator, a cooperator, an enabler. In retrospect, I think I should have been saying the same thing to myself. Why had I failed to help my friend when there were so many signs that he was in distress prior to this accident? Why hadn't I bothered to at least talk to him about it or refer him to someone who could help him? Why hadn't we been brothers to him? Why hadn't we been bed-toters? What I'm getting at is the need to develop a true sense of being a brother or sister in Christ, to have a true sense of fraternal correction. Somehow or the other, in the desire to not seem judgmental, we become tolerant of something that was destroying our community and destroying in an intense way a member of our community. In the end, this is not compassion or mercy at all. As family members, we also need to be true friends and look out for one another. We must not be busybodies, but at the same time, we have to develop a healthy sense of fraternal correction for the individual's good and for the good of the community. This is true throughout the church today, whether in a parish, in a seminary, in our neighborhood, in our family. Many people have lost their way. They may be like John and struggle with an addiction. They might be so lost and mired in sin that they can't see a way out. They might really, truly be paralyzed. And they need to be brought by dedicated friends to Jesus, who is God's mercy itself. They need a church that reconciles. The church must be a community of mercy.